Hello, everybody. Welcome to Hamster's Hobby Hang. I'm back. How are you? Hello, Finley. Let's get some tunage going. Maybe? Oh, this is just a song with where it's quiet at the beginning. Hello, hello. Yes, there's a lot of negative space in that build. The swamp stuff is really fun for negative space. I got some plants here, and you know what? I even did some base coats before we started. How about that? Maybe it's hard to tell on camera. This is actually dark green, not black. As much as we all love watching paint dry, decided to skip that. Because we're still going to watch some paint dry. I heard Gen Con was awesome. I'm not sure how many of you were there that are here, but yeah. And some of these do like a slightly different green base on one of the sides, but I just like didn't overall to start. We'll still do that base coat together. Do you prime these? I prime these because these are resin prototypes. Dwarvenite, you don't have to prime. It has pretty good adhesion with the Picorni paints and stuff. These are 3D prints. How was the fishing for you? Oh my goodness. It was amazing. Last week I was fishing in Ontario, Canada for walleye. I caught the biggest northern pike of my life. It was 38 inches. Caught some smallmouth bass and ate a lot of fish. It was a lot of fun. A good escape. Speaking of wildlands and that pre-roll build, I was out and about in the lands of wild. Yeah, it was a total blast. And no rain at all. I've been doing that same trip. This is my 3rd year. There's usually at least one rainy day, and you just throw on the rain gear and you fish all day still, but man, it was nice weather. But while I was doing that, others were at Gen Con, and I heard that went really, really well, and people were super pumped. So that was great to hear. Come back to and hear how that went. Hey, listen, as long as you're gaming, use whatever you have. I hope you have some Dwarven Forge to supplement your collection, but the #1 goal is to have gameage on the table. This one is a little busted. That was my fault. That's why it's here on my desk instead of in the office. Some bulbs broke off. But look, on this side, you can't even tell on this view. Well, kind of on that one. Anyway. Let's see. Yeah, exactly. No exclusivity. We're all just hobbyists and gamers, and we want everyone to be gaming and playing. So I'm just pulling up the steps here. The plants are designed by Aaron. Some beautiful color pops and accents. So I'm going to make sure I have some of this in front of me. Yeah, we'll put out, other kind of friends of the company if they're doing terrain and stuff. Why not? We love gaming products, So I didn't do this exact, but you just want to start off, throw a little bit of black into your deep water green just to get a nice dark green. And then the planter stuff, if you've seen other like blue accents, like the little bitty roof pieces and stuff, it's the same as that. So it's like basalt blue and cardboard. What is it? A little bit of white too. So I'll kind of mix some of that up here. But it's like a desaturated blue, so, you know, if you have a nice deep blue, I mean like an ultramarine would be good. And throw on something warm and neutral like cardboard to desaturate it, you're gonna get something pretty similar. You have anything like that in your collection? Oh, sweet, that's cool. Some video content. I think I had a little too much cardboard, maybe. Still want it to be blue. Ooh, your stuff's coming Saturday. That'd be fun. Oh, you know what I had? Excuse me. Here, I gotta show you something. Well, there's not much to see right now, but let me make sure I have this sort of correct. Still too blue. Oftentimes I like mix really big batches for like the bulk prototypes, so sometimes it's hard for me to get this like a tiny sampling down. It's like that first color's like, better dump out a huge amount. Yeah, you know, that black rot tree, there's a little something, you know, I use slightly different paints in the factory, like theirs are the durable enamel and stuff, right? I don't know what happened back then. It got a little darker in the factory somehow. It's not their fault. That was me learning how to like go back and forth with them, and right? So I know what you mean, it is a little dark. In person, the prototype wasn't quite so dark, but they're just going off of, you know, our back and forth messaging and everything, so that's on me. I still think it looks cool. I mean, it gives off a creepy vibe, certainly. But there was like a little bit of like subtle highlighting that I maybe should have pushed more in the master if I wanted it to like exist more, you know what I mean, on the final. But maybe one day, once we're done doing Cities Reforged streams, we can do some alternate black rot tree, or maybe even show you how you can do like some simple stuff to push that. I still think it looks good like in a build with other, like if you put it in the collection of wildlands, it does its job of being like the dark creepy tree in the collection, so that's good. It's just, you know, we're always chasing perfection and you never quite land there, so that's one of those ones that's like, I should have considered how some of that darkness would end up and maybe like adjusted in the beginning process, but I have since learned many lessons since Wildlands, and I still love that model, that piece. Hey, at a minor league baseball game, that's awesome. Right after this, we're gonna watch the Mets play. because they're playing it in Central Time, so it starts right after the stream instead of an hour before when they're out on this side. Okay, so I think this color shows up in like some video guides. So I didn't do it super exact, but just know when you're looking at it, like we're using that sort of neutralized blue accent color that's on some of the cities. And now it's real easy. Just, you're kind of doing a dry brush. I don't think you have to do a full dry brush. It will kind of take a while. I just get a really small amount of paint. And I sort of try to hit a perpendicular angle and light pressure. You could dry brush it and it would be fine too. I just find I get opacity a little quicker doing it this way. And on the print, the design is pretty fine, the detail here, so I'm losing some of it a little bit. But just do that to your taste. You just want to get this blue and that little bit of green. Like, we're already doing the base coat on the plants, so it kind of adds a nice shadow with some blue in it because it's green, right? So that's why I like having that instead of just black or dungeon gray. Kind of like having that underneath. I like that Aaron put that there. And I wouldn't even worry about painting around like the handles and stuff, because we just do a single color over the top and you'll fix any blue that gets on there. Sometimes I'm a little careful just to like sort of leave almost that black lining like shadow under the handle, but and then the rim and handles are just cardboard. Depending on the speed you want, you could do a base coat, you could do dry brush. I kind of like it to be a little scratchy, you know, a little interest in there. You know, it's kind of outside, so my voice is too quiet. It's also tough because, like, I start looking away from the mic, right? So hopefully that's better. I don't want to blow your ears out either, but I think there's a compressor on there anyway. Alrighty, thank you for letting me know. Cool. It's hard because I have like the music set to, actually maybe this is why. I was gonna say I have the levels set a little lower than the desktop, but that or than the mic, but that wasn't true here. I don't know what happened. It updated my software, so maybe it kind of like got adjusted. So that would make sense. So I'll turn that down. Yeah, this is some soothing music. This is an artist named Amy Waters, and she's a friend of Chris, who you see on the Anvil, and writes a lot of the updates and stuff. um, from his days in the Northwest. It's where Chris and she met. And it's a lot of like video game music inspired stuff, but this album is especially zen. And we're very lucky and grateful that we can use it on here and not get copyright strikes. And I also find it really relaxing myself. Hello. Yeah, software updates always mess up sound settings, yeah. Yeah. I should probably go in and double check those filters. There's usually not any random loud noises here, but you never know. Kind of get a little more opacity, but I like to leave a little kind of scratchiness. So you can see here, it's not super dry brushy, but we've still left behind some of the green. It's just some nice edge and separation. So I like that. Oh, I was gonna say something. So, if you've been watching Hobby Hang at all in the last year, you know that I've painted a bunch of those skeletons. Where's the one guy? It all started with this one, the Concertina Skelly, and I love these designs so much. They're so cool. Here's another one we did on Hobby Hang. And the sculptor made a bunch more. And they went on pre-order in July and they just arrived. So we'll definitely do some of those on the next non-cities Hobby Hang. Oh, I forgot to do the top part of this. We'll probably have to fix this little top part after we paint the plants, but that's okay. Yeah, I think well, I guess I don't quite know the difference. I know concertinas and accordions are really similar, but it's one of those. Which is what made me perk up at that collection of skeletons anyway. Here's another cool one we did on Hobby Hang. And so this one is unpainted. I really like this shield and the pose with the shield. He's like holding it up and there's arrows being blocked. I think that's cool. Yeah, that's a Die Hard Miniatures. Sculptor named Tim Prow. Definitely check them out. And like, other than skeletons too, also has some great looking sculpts. Here's this one. Is a Die Hard. Are you okay? Yeah. This one is a Die Hard. Did I do the other one I'm thinking of? I don't remember. Oh, nope, I didn't paint this one yet, but this one is a Die Hard. Sorry, it's a little hard to see. He's like this floaty magic user, and he's got like little spell effects coming out of the arms, and there's sort of like a Phantom of the Opera type mask thing going on a little bit. So anyway, yeah, big fan. Big fan. Oh, I wasn't thinking. I dipped it into our blue. Alright, I'm gonna stop picking at that because, again, we'll probably have to fix the top end, but. Terrain painting party? That sounds like a blast. That's a really fun idea. Everyone gets to paint a little bit of the pieces that they'll play on. Sounds awesome. Three dungeon sets. Nice. Hopefully, it seems like the sort of bread and butter stuff in dungeons should go fairly quickly, yeah? Get some snacks going, see the progress. Oh yeah, dungeons are classic. Oh, that's right. Do I have Stone Edge? There's just a really light Stone Edge dry brush over the planter as well. It's a pretty good, like, overall dusty highlight color for a lot of stuff. Stone Edge, you know, just like an ivory. It's great to mix into a highlight or just do a light dusting to highlight anything. There, that nice design is starting to show. You see that? That's... I'm even going a little heavy just because I like seeing that design show up. You can do this kind of as much as or as little as you like. This one is quite a bit heavier. This is less so. Hit the top, just get the edge going. Oh, nice. The Warhammer painter ran out, bought all the paint collection, and they came in. Awesome. Awesome. Nate and I are playing at the August monthly Warhammer tournament is at our LGS this weekend, so we'll be doing that. I think I am actually going to skip the top part on this dry brush because it's for sure going to get some planned colors on it, so you can always touch it up. Paint parties are dangerous if you're not diligent about the paint cup and drink. Yeah, that's a good point. I literally at my desk at Dwarven Forge, I have a big jar. I started drinking out of a big jar, and immediately I put some tape on it that said drink on it because I also use jars for the paint water. Okay. So it looks like for the factory design, the shorter plant has a slightly lighter dry brush. Or not dry brush, like green base coat. So, you know, they're sculpted to be two different plants, obviously, right? So we're just going to try to get a little different start going. Oh, I got a big gunky goop of shallow green here, which works out because it looks like it's 3-to-1 approximately. So that will do just fine. Might even get a little more deep water green. It's still a shadowy base. Hydrate with paint water. Oh man, no cadmium paints, all non-toxic. Make sure. Oh, and of course this one has kind of a purpley base, so you're just going to use, like, if you're using Bacorni, just do your blue, your Regal Red. You can throw in a touch of black or Dungeon Gray or something dark to just get this dark desaturated purpley thing going. Oh, sure. A little more lively on that black rot tree, yeah. Yeah, that would work, right? Just like if you just want to have some creepy bits on an otherwise sort of regular, healthy-ish tree, that would work. The sludge of paint at the bottom of my paint mug is probably sentient. I've had my more than my fair share of those type of mugs and jars and stuff. Okay. Okay, so it looks like we basically were just gonna do a dry brush step on the leaves, kind of following the same pathway as our base coat. I think in the photo I have, this base is actually a little bit darker, so I'm gonna throw some more deep green into the shallow green. You know, we want them to be different, but we're gonna dry brush on top of them, so I don't want it to be like too stark and light. Well, that's a good idea. Have a rinsing jar and then another clean water jar. So basically deep water green plus black, and then these two together. So the highlights are just like caverns plus deep and stone edge plus shallow. I'm just gonna use stone edge because I have it out. And they're doing something kind of similar. But you're just kind of lightening and desaturating the either main base color, you know, to get a little highlight. In the case of replacing stone edge with caverns, probably use a little less stone edge than you would caverns, but it'll get pretty close. Getting a little more opaque because I see some of that cardboard on the bottom stems. That's kind of cool though. You see some stems kind of peek out on a little more opaque on the highlight. It's kind of fun. And on the factory, it looks like this, or on the prototype, it looks like this dry brush is fairly light. I'm kind of going heavy-handed on it right now. But you get the idea. You can do this as much as you like. But what's cool is this ends up being a cooler green and this ends up being a slightly warmer green. So they have that sort of contrast. That is still pretty wet, so I'm going to just go to the flowers. You know what we can do, especially to make these flowers really pop, is we're going to base them in white before we do anything else. Because if we're trying to get that colorful flower color over like black or the dark green, it's going to take a lot of layers and be kind of frustrating. So you could even just use stone edge dry brush. I might just do that since we have it out on the palette. We still got some wet green here, but still just gonna finish out the layer, because it's all meant to get covered up anyway, you know? It will only help. Okay, so I'm gonna let that dry. But of course, these are great opportunities to do a little customization, right? Do something else. So we have some deep green and shallow green on the palette still. I'm gonna pull out some moss green as well, because why not? Maybe. This one's a little gunky. Actually, you know what I wanted to show you was, we're gonna leave the base coat the same on this one. And you can get away with maybe skipping a step by just doing different dry brushes on top, right? So we know the idea was one was cool and one was warm. So even though it's a deep water green sort of base, why don't we just take this really warm, bright moss green and do that. That really warms it up. And then I'll just take our deep green highlight here. And we'll maybe even go lighter, like on the application, to keep the plant pretty dark. Now we got away with adding that differentiation on the same base coat, right? And this got so much brighter that maybe we can even do a further highlight on the bright one. That'd be kind of cool. So maybe this one will have brighter leaves and a darker flower or something. There are some little leaves sculpted in here, and sometimes if you don't paint them at all, it kind of looks like a big black hole, so I don't worry about it too much. Just make sure you hit it with like something in there, right? Look at that. That's a nice punchy plant. Nice contrast going on. Get the white or stone edge on the flowers to start drying. Oh yeah, these sculpts are hardcore in their detail. Even the leaves have like little, it's a little hard to see, like grooves and stuff on the leaf. Very cool. And I'm, with the print being a little softer, and I'm actually repainting these for, there's a lot of paint underneath here. And even with all that, there's still so much great detail in the texture coming through. How's that doing? Okay. We still got to do a little highlight on the shallow green side. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Double airbrush. Spray. Sounds like fun. I just got a picture from my buddy who's printing the terrain for Malediction, the skirmish game. I got it at Adepticon. That stuff is massive. I even played on it in the demo, and I like forgot just how massive it is. Which is cool because it's like a fairly small board. It's like the 2.5 by 2.5 feet, but the terrain takes up a significant amount of space, and it's also a significant part of the game because it gives you an ability, kind of like in Magic the Gathering enchantment, but you normally have to be like within range or on the terrain to get it. And there's kind of a mini game as part of the setup where the terrain placement is part of the game. So when you bring that enchantment effect with the terrain, you also bring the physical collection of pieces. And you get, for a standard game, you get one large piece, one medium, and two medium and two small. You get 5 pieces. And you have to place them alternating, starting with large and then medium and then small. And they can't be within 3 inches of each other. So there's kind of like, you're like, what is my most important piece of terrain? Like I was playing a super fragile caster like list, and there was this one that had sort of cage elements coming up where the gaps were too small for most models to charge through. So it's kind of like a charge shield while they're casting out of it. So I was like, that's my most important piece of terrain. That's like my biggest placement. But then they're placing stuff to try to make sure that I can't place it where I want to. So it's a fun mini game. And then, of course, then you battle on it, and it's super relevant because it's all positioning. But the setup being part of the game is really fun. But anyway, so I also had a friend print stuff. It just came today, and it was like, some of it failed. I was like, that's ruins. I'll just snap off any weird bits and make it more ruined. I love mechanics like that. Yeah, it's so interesting. Like in Warhammer, the faction train is cool. It gives you an ability, but it's like, it kind of is like, that could have also just been a battle trait, or just like an army rule for some of them. You know what I mean? Like I play Stormcast, so the portal, it's like a teleporty portal. So you plant down the portal, you got to be within range of it. So like that you need, because of the range, you need like a terrain piece. But sometimes it's just like, you get a buff. It's like, okay, you could have just like printed that, right? Like, why am I lugging around this model? I mean, some of them are cool, so it's fun, but it's like not, it's kind of clunky mechanically where it sort of just feels tacked on sometimes. But this feels like a game mechanic. Okay, let's see here. So it looks like these flowers are kind of a purple that leans blue. Kind of violety. So I'm just going to get out our Picorni red and blue. Looks like she put a little white as well. That's awesome. That is good to have. That's the first time this is happening for me, and I already feel like I'm getting spoiled. Now, they're a friend from out of state, so, I'm going to pay them to ship it and stuff, right? But still. See how much nicer we get that opacity with the light color underneath? And this is even a fairly dark color, but it still has, like, because acrylic paint is always a little bit transparent, it still has a little kind of luminosity underneath it coming through, as opposed to black or a dark color being underneath. And for the sort of highlight on these, there's a couple ways to do it. One is to wet blend, which is, I think, how Aaron did most of the batches on this. And really, it's just, I'm going to make sure there's some decent wet paint on the tops. But then she just took some white, small, tiny, tiny amount of white. Just put it over the top. Gonna wipe the brush off. Smooth it out a little. Looks like I can even use even less paint. What the heck is on my brush? So I'm just gonna take wet white, a little bit on the top, and just sort of wipe off the brush on the towel, smoosh it down. So it's just like you're mixing paints on the palette, but you're doing it on the model itself instead. So this one here, this one came out pretty nice. Look at that range of a little quick gradient, really fast. Now, if you would rather not do the wet blending, totally fine. You can totally just like let this base of the flower bulb dry and do a quick little dry brush, and then maybe a little more even, more opaque spot right on the top. So we'll do that when this is dry. But for now, we'll do a couple more in the wet blend method. Really gently, you don't want to press down super hard, or you're just gonna like scrape it right off, right? Just use the brush as a little smoosh tool to gently shove it around as you go for this type of method. And start with less paint over more to get the hang of how much you really need on your piece in particular for the effect that you like. So you can always add a little more. You can always just let it dry and do this again. It's actually really forgiving. I know wet blending sometimes seems kind of like an intimidating term, but you can always just paint over it, and it's really pretty forgiving. Because we've all mixed paint a little bit on the palette, right? You're just doing the same thing here. So you're just taking a smaller amount of paint and doing it right on the model. So I'll save a couple bulbs for when it's dry so we can do a non-wet blending method. But the other one is a similar technique, but with yellow and orange. Now here's where you definitely need a good bright undercoat here. So this green might even give me some trouble for the yellow, just because for all of time, as long as paint has existed, yellow pigment is just weak and frustrating. It's a great color, it's just like the physical pigment is just has low opacity when you make paint out of it. So it's nothing you're doing wrong or anything if you ever feel that way when painting yellow. It's just how yellow paint tends to be. So we can see quite a bit of that green underneath. So for this one, I might go ahead and give it 2 layers. Let it dry, give it another layer. You see on this color, you can see quite a bit more of the, even though we painted one layer of white, there was still some green showing through. So we should be okay after a second layer. And we're gonna do an orangey highlight step like we did over here anyway, so I'm not worried about it, but it's always best to do a couple extra layers when you're doing yellow. Let's do a little more on this thing here. Oh, okay, cool. So I already have a bit of this purpley mix going on. So once you find your, it's just you know, your red, white, or wait a minute. It's cardboard, red, blue, and a little bit of dungeon gray. You can probably get away with a smaller amount of black. But then once you have that mix for this, the highlight is just adding cardboard to that, which is really convenient. So we will do that. This bush remains fairly dark, so try not to be too heavy-handed on this. I mean, do it however you like the result, but just for the prototype scheme, the factory scheme, it's a little bit of a light touch on this, looks like. And these colors aren't exactsies. I'm just kind of winging it a little bit on the palette here, but I think there'll be at least a PDF guide if there isn't already, to guide you through some of this. Looks like my purple plant is going a little pink, more pink than Aaron's was, but it's the same colors and you get the idea. We're just doing the classic dark base, dry brush, and then hit some accents here. And I still like the color. It's still a fun little plant color. Oh, this is cool. This fan plant. I remember this. So you have this dark base, right? And then you just paint the top half with some of the moss green. And then you're going to do an all over highlight that makes it kind of cohesive together, but then you have sort of this gradient. So what I would do is like do a pretty opaque patch on the top and sort of like feather it out and make it less so as you go down a smaller amount a little bit. You don't have to be too careful with this because that dry brush is going to soften it out for us as well. That'll look cool. And then the dry brush is like yellow and white, so it's a super bright because the moss green's already pretty bright, right? So it's really interesting how the single dry brush will look so different across both of these colors just because they're so high contrast already. So it will be, the highlight will be softer on the moss green and then really sharp on the dark green. Oh, okay. Actually, that dry brush is used again on this other one. That's cool. So there's actually a little bit of Bubbles Blue in the base coat of this. Not right now, but we're gonna put it on there. It's shallow green, bubbles, and white, so it's a fairly cool and light base. I don't have bubbles with me, but I have this thing that's similar, so we'll use that. Okay, cool. And then these two have the same highlight, so we'll let those dry. Let's get another layer of yellow on these flowers. And while this is wet now, we can sort of do some more wet blendy stuff. I don't think I have Picorni orange with me, but I have this other orange. The same idea, just a really small amount of paint. And the orange is going to be stronger than like using a white up here, I think. So really be conservative with the amount of paint, because it'll be really easy to turn this whole thing orange, you know? So especially on your first couple, I am being a little too gentle here, so I'll add just a tiny bit. But you know, just get a sense of the paints you're using while you do this. There you go, nice little gradient. Okay, and I'm gonna do, you know, the different method on the purple. So now I'm just like mixing some white into the purple, which is just what we were doing on the model previously. But so now this base coat has dried. Instead of wet blending, you could just do a quick little dry brush. Small amount of white to do a smaller area of dry brush. And you have a really similar effect, right? So all of these work. I would think you can even do a wet paint sort of blend as well. Instead of blending toward the bottom with the wet blend, just take some diluted paint in the mix, blend it up, rinse the brush, feather it up to sort of get any hard line out of it, and leave the heaviest deposit at the top. And you know, you get, once again, the same thing. And I'll get a tiny amount of the white again. Real similar. So you can kind of try some different techniques and figure out how you like to do these yourself, and there's no wrong way to do it. So look at that. This plant, we've painted them 3 different ways. They look fairly similar, right? I hope. You can always make some slight adjustments if you'd like. Do a similar thing here with the orange. I'm gonna try to rub off even more paint for the dry brush just because it's a pretty powerful orange I have here. Nice soft dry brush on the whole area, and then hit it with a slightly heavier dab of paint just to sort of cheat that gradient effect, where it's mostly just a trick of opacity, right? Where we did one dry brush and one slightly more paint, so it's really just a difference in opacity between those quick little layers. So you don't have to do wet blending, is what I'm saying. It's one quick way to do it once you get the hang of it, but you can do it however you like to get this result. Thank you, Finley. Yeah, the little plants and stuff are always fun, right? I am a fan. So you can do this fairly quickly, right? Like I kind of just went over the remaining bulbs. The gentle dry brush, and I'm just going to get a little more paint and tap, tap, tap on the top. Tap, tap, tap on the top just to make a slightly more opaque section. And the rest is kind of tricking our own eyes. By getting that soft dry brush, it's kind of like in cartoons, right? Where they don't draw every single frame of motion, but they'll do like 3 frames in the, you know, the simplest form, right, of a movement, and your eyes fill in the rest. There's some optical mixing going on with here as well. Like when we wet blend, we're physically making a gradient of a lot of tones, which is cool. But the soft dry brush with a tap, just a gentle tap of opacity on the top, kind of makes our eyes fill in a gradient because we're seeing like 3 different things together. The most opaque tip, a soft little dry brushy transition into the base yellow. So thank you. Yes, exactly. So many things happen in nature. There's really no wrong way to paint stuff like this. Okay, this one should have dried. So just gonna throw some white into our yellow. And again, that's we want to take off quite a bit of paint on the dry brush and keep it light, because yellow and white will get heavy-handed pretty quickly. Let's just see how it's coming out. Yeah, that's nice. So you'll see on here, we've seen it before, I'm actually not frequently doing a true dry brush where it's really dusty and I'm rubbing off a lot of paint. When I make sure to do that is something like this, where the jump in value between the base coat that exists and what I'm dry brushing is really big. That's when I will do a light dry brush. So like right now, let me zoom out a little bit. We're doing this color right here and dry brushing it with this. So there's a fairly big gap between the brightness of those two. So that's when I want to make sure I'm doing a pretty light dusting. You can see how the contrast is awesome. That's why we do it. But it'd be really easy if you go heavy-handed to make it look primarily like this color, right? But in our sort of bread and butter stuff, you know, like a dungeons or a caverns, you know, there's plenty of contrast to make it poppy, but they're a little bit closer together in color even. Like this is going from green to yellow, so there's a little more jump that way as well. So anytime you're jumping to the value scale or color wheel, you want to be a little gentler in your approach. And if they're closer together, you can get away with heavier applications. See right there, it got real heavy. Perfect example. Had to rub some more paint off. See, this is the same color. Do you see the difference? That's what I'm talking about. Look at this leaf to this leaf, right? So that's why it's kind of important. And of course, it gets easier once you've like have your mixes and you've painted a couple and you start getting the hang of it and the muscle memory down. You got to think about it less, but just when you're starting, the worst thing ever, right, is to mix up your paint. You're halfway through a piece and then you throw some paint down and it's way too heavy and you're like, oh no. It's hard to erase. Sometimes you can sort of flood the area with some water and get it off. Sometimes you can paint over it with a patch of the base color, but you know, you don't want to slow yourself down too much. So now where you can be heavier is up here, right? Because the moss green is a lot brighter. So this is where you can be heavy-handed. And with the same color mix, this white and yellow, you have a ton of variation on this plant. Very cool. So it's basically 3 colors. The dark green base coat, the moss green, and this all over highlight, but it looks like there's so much variation on it, you know? It's a fun design by Aaron. So let's just do some more. I don't know, I'm gonna throw some whatever is randomly on my palette already. We can do some similar techniques with different colors and see how it turns out. Here we'll try some more wet blending. We can even do a few colors at once, really fast. Once you get the hang of it, it can be really fast. So I'm not even like cleaning my brush, I'm just rubbing it off on the towel. I'm gonna take some red that's already on the palette, do a really big blob, and then some small amount of white on the palette. Look at that. Never fully rinsing the brush, just wiping it. It's kind of cool. Just working fast. The acrylic will start to dry, so you don't want to be... You gotta work with a little confidence here. Get the red going. Some of the purple's already kind of dry, that's fine. You're not even going to notice in the end result. We're just talking about how little things happen in nature all over the place, and how we can trick the eye with the optical mixing. So don't worry too much if you notice some drier patches. Just going to tap with the white. Not even worrying about the blending just yet. Going to get white on all of the wet red. And wipe my brush off and just gently push all this around. You can see it's still glimmering a little bit. It's still wet. So you want to have a controlled but fairly quick, confident approach. And you can even do wet blending with like a few colors at once. It's kind of cool. And in no time, look at that. That's kind of fun. So if you haven't done techniques like that before, this is kind of a fun chance to practice, right? Because there's such small areas, they're going to be easy to fix if you really, really want to change the result afterward. But, you know, then you've just lost. I just did that in like a minute, right? Maybe a couple minutes at most. So worth experimenting on little bits like this, because sometimes just happy accidents happen too, right? Oh, I put more red than I expected, but oh, it made an awesome, cool little effect, right? So you never know. Things like that can only happen with experimentation. we have some of our blue out here. Oh, we have a blue and yellow right next to each other. I'm going to try something with that. See how that looks. It's gonna go green, obviously, so maybe it'll be too close to the leaves, but we'll see. There'll still be a bit of separation because the bottom will be so blue and dark. You know, that's not nothing. That's something. So, I think it'd be cooler if we did like a red on top of the blue. Oops, it's Thursday. Yes. Welcome, welcome. We're painting some plants. Talking about different ways to do the bulb gradients. A little wet blending, a little dry brushing. You can always like add a touch more paint too. Like this is kind of, you gotta trust your intuition on some of these little bits. Yeah, that's cool. See, look, we experimented with something, we decided to change it. Bang, bang, boom. Add some more blue. Add this thing. I went a little heavier on this light mix because the blue is getting a little dark because I added so much of it. So again, a little intuitive adjustment. Just trust your eyes as you look at it. There we go. Technically Friday here now. Hey! Thanks for tuning in from the future. Now we did that whitish base, so make sure you kind of shove some paint down because sometimes some little specks of white will show up, you know, just because we missed it a little bit. But that's kind of a fine line as well too, right? Because you don't want to push the flower color onto the leaves a little bit, so there is a little kind of once over sort of zhuzhing on these plants. Sometimes some flower color gets onto like an upward part of a leaf. It looks a little weird. But don't be too harsh on it, because remember, we've been sitting here staring at this really far up close. Make sure you set it on the table and look at kind of gaming level, like 2 or 3 feet away, like you're sitting down at the table. And judge it from that distance. Because the reality is, right, we have a big terrain collection to paint. So we want to keep progress moving forward. So again here, even though I am wet blending, I'm doing a similar thing where I've kind of rubbed out a lot of the gradient mix, so we'll just come back. Just the top part. Get a little more opacity. Same as we did on some of the other ones before. Rub the brush off. Don't even need to rinse it. Start smooshing a bit. There you go. Sorry, it looks like I was zoomed in further than I thought. I might have missed some of that on camera, but here we are. Another custom example here. So go wild on these. Oh, and this plant has flowers too. Let's see. So it looks like the sort of prototype factory flower is stucco and red. So basically just brighten up your red with something like, you know, warmer than white. I don't have stucco right here, so I'm going to use stone edge. Maybe a touch of yellow in there even. Just to add the warmth that stucco has. So I'm kind of making a pinky orange and adding a bunch of white. Ends up being kind of a peachy color. And what I like about painting this, because I've painted some of these before, I'm just kind of referencing the steps again because Aaron designed it, but you know, there's a bunch of flowers sculpted on here, but almost the whole bush is flowery. So it's kind of fun where you can sort of just pick out which ones you want to be the flower color and which ones are leaf color, because it's a little hard to discern between them, which means you can kind of do whatever you want. I like to leave a little bit of green in the center if I can, just for some variation and not just like a flat application of color. But yeah, when I painted a handful of these, I never painted these flowers, like each flower. I never painted the same flowers on each bush. I just kind of like looked at it. How did I like sort of the visual flow, and picked flowers that way, just eyeballing it. So, you know, if you really stare at it, maybe you end up missing some flowers or painting some leaves as flowers, but to me, it doesn't really matter. Just get it on the table, get it looking cool, put it in a build, call it a day. Lower down here, it's a little more obvious. The summer leaves, now that I look at it, right? So, you know, just feel it out on this, I think. Hey, awesome. Great news, 600 backers. That is exciting. I'm gonna push these bulbs on the purple plane a little more. I think, based on this photo from Aaron's, the base on the leaves was a little darker and the bulbs are closer to this, but since I kind of went a little heavy on the dry brush for the purple, I'm just gonna brighten up these bulbs here. So we're deviating a little bit from like the factory version, but I think it'll look cool and look similar. Oh, and you know what? Here's kind of another example of some fun wet blending you could do. So I had this brighter mix now. Wipe off the brush. Take the base coat mix that's still on the palette and sort of swoosh it into the bottom parts of these bulbs to make a little gradient. Rub the brush off on the towel. Smush the hard line down a little bit. Get some gradient, because these bulbs have some good volume to them. So if you push that, you'll get some cool effects. And I'm even doing a similar thing just with one step here on this mix, just by leaving it on the top and kind of dry brushing as I go down. So opaque, 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 smush it out, and we still kind of get that volumetric gradient going on. Get even more shadow on these, I think. And I'm not even using like a pointy brush, right? Really being loose with it. And I'm kind of doing reverse, right? I'm just adding some wet paint to the bottom, maybe smush it up a little bit. And there we go. So these are pretty much close to the prototype and factory scheme. But why not, if you're going unpainted, grab a couple and do some of your own, right? So great examples of using some all-over dry brushes here and still getting variance, right? These are the same base coat, different dry brushes. So we're not doing a separate base coat, which is always an option. I'm just saying, like, where can you maybe find efficiency where you want it? So this had slightly different base coats, and this had 2 base coats and 2 dry brushes on the leaves, right? So that gives us good variation. This has the same base coat on the leaves and 2 different dry brushes. This had two different base coats, plus this little quick half base coat, and then the same dry brush. But they still look super different, right? So you can always experiment with how your mixes interact with each other. Yeah, definitely. Always love to have some variation in the organic stuff. Heck, even in the inorganic stuff. When I was painting Starforged, I liked all the different weird scratchiness that happened. Because one panel may be more weathered or damaged than another. Oh, and I guess we didn't do too bad on the upper limb. A couple touch-ups that I find I had to do on these quite a bit. You know, I mean, I could put these on the table and be happy, right? First of all, don't get too hung up on the cleanup. But sometimes I went a little too crazy poking in the bulbs, especially with the white undercoat. So like right here, it's starting to poke out onto a leaf. If that really bothers you, I would just go back to the base coat. Just get a small amount of paint. Don't worry about like re-highlighting that area. Just hit it with green again. Just hit it with green. Especially in the center area, you're going to see it. I'd be a little more careful and precise here, because the last thing you want is to paint over the flowers you just did. But you still want sort of that visual separation to be there. So if there's really a spot that sticks out to your eye that is kind of wonky, just gently get a little separation, maybe dilute it slightly. So even on this bright green, I might even just dilute shallow green, which is lighter than what's on here, or darker than what's on here. And at least just sort of glaze it so it's not blue. It's at least a green, right? And then I might go back and, at least just on the outer edges, my cardboard's all dried up. You might get a little green on here, so I wouldn't worry about like doing the whole edge, because again, what would be worse than having green on this part, I think, is getting cardboard up on the stems. The focus is the flower, right? So when I'm touching up any of this trim on the planter, I'm just focusing on the outer edge to cover up most of the green. But the most important part of this step, I think, is to not touch the plant itself. And then if you want to as well, you can do a quick once over of the highlight just for that edge of the planter, since we sort of repainted it. I don't want to go too heavy on this, but you know, you want it to look somewhat natural. And not so much like a patch job. Just that top edge. While we're at it, just change the angle that you're holding it. Hit those four corners, make them sharp if you want. There you go. Yeah, the two versions are a great idea. I'm glad that we did that. Because as soon as you have too many of the same one next to each other, if there's only one, you know, then it starts to look a little strange. There's only two plants that exist in the Tudor Village. But if you have two copies and you can switch around, which side is which, then all of a sudden when you have a lot of them, and especially when you have other plants, I mean, you can make it look really varied, even though it's only a small handful of plant pieces with different paint. Okay, so it looks like, let's see, is next Thursday the end of the campaign? So that means there probably won't be a hobby hang. I anticipate there'll be a really cool, fun finale stream, though. So we will likely be live, not in my home, but probably at the studio. And we'll have a bunch of people there to wrap this thing up. So that'll be fun. See, there's a little bit of, especially when it's a stark difference. Like if there's some of this bluish purple on the dark green leaves, like you can't even really tell, but a little bit like this where the bright yellow is getting onto that upward plane of leaf, that is something I might want to fix. So I wouldn't get too picky, but you just want the separation to be there. Like, this one here kind of looks like the flower sort of smushed out. I'll patch that. But similar to like the planter edge, I would rather paint less of the green leaf in order to not hit the plant bulb that I just painted so nicely as much. Dirt Path Bonanza, yeah. I tell you what, some cool looking stuff coming. I saw some of it today. Oh, you miss next Thursday? All right. I know you'll be there in spirit. Yeah, clay looks awesome. I'm not always 100% sure what you have seen yet or not, so I don't. But, yeah, so I don't always say too much. But if you've seen the clay, I mean, phenomenal, isn't it? LARPing away on a campsite with no phone or internet. That is the life, huh? Well, have fun. Best of luck to you. It was pretty beanie last night. I suppose. It's the second to last OTA, so yeah. Second week-long event of the year. That sounds like a blast, Finley. Have a great time. Usually I tune into On the Anvil. Forget what I was up to yesterday, but cool. So yes, I'm sure there'll be a really cool On the Anvil on Wednesday, likely a finale stream on Thursday. Thank you so much again for all of your support in this campaign. It's been really, really exciting to launch this thing and see all the excitement, especially when there's like a lot of downers in the world right now, right? There's like the tariffs up in the air and all this stuff. It's like, and so to like launch this thing finally and have all the excitement coming in is really a blessing. So thank you so much. Thank you for tuning into the streams. Thank you for hanging out with me tonight. And we will see you next time. Alrighty. Good night, everybody.